Welcome back to the John Fredericks Show with Colonel Mike and Tom deSabla. We now have as our guest a distinguished economics professor from George Mason University and syndicated columnist, Dr. Walter E. Williams. Dr. Williams, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Williams. It's been a long time. I missed you.
Yeah, it has been a long time.
Well, I'm really glad to have the opportunity to co-host here on the John Fredericks Show. Most of Virginia can hear us. So, how things at George Mason?
Well, classes haven't started again, but everything's going fine.
You know, I'm Ubering for money, Dr. Williams, and I had a couple of George Mason economics students in my car a couple months back, and they said, you're like the Svengali there. They said everybody tries to get in your classes.
That was very generous of them.
Oh yeah. But, you know, they knew what they were talking about. They said it's a big deal and it's really hard to get into your classes. They said. Anyhow, so I'm looking at some of your most recent columns, and I first would like to get a little confirmation on something that I had said previously on the show. And I'd like to get confirmation, see if I was correct. Doesn't economic theory say that when you lower interest rates, you should be stimulating investment and employment?
Well, the lowering interest rates really do mean that you should stimulate investment, but that's not the only that's not the only source of investment stimulation.
Of course.
I mean, there are other things. There are regulations, there are taxes, and other influences on the amount people are willing to invest.
Do you find it odd, Dr. Williams, that with the rates, Fed funds rate pegged at 0 for 8 years, that we have such a large portion of our working population not working? And do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that I guess it's something like 92 million people are able to be in the labor force, but are not in the labor force, and the labor force participation rate is around 63%.
Yes.
And for the listeners, the labor force participation rate is just simply the extent to which a particular group of people are in the labor market. Now, there's other things that influence the labor force participation rate. Welfare is one thing, or unemployment compensation. And it turns out right now that the duration of unemployment is the longest that has ever been in our history. And one of the reasons that is very long is because the unemployment compensation makes it so that people don't have to take any old job. That is, a person can say, well, look, I'm not going to take this job at McDonald's or at Home Depot. I'll just draw unemployment compensation. But if the unemployment compensation and other welfare programs were not available, and not taking that job meant starvation, I doubt whether the person would choose not to take the job.
Yeah, we'd see a big spike in those employment participation rates, wouldn't we?
Pardon?
We'd see a big spike
right.
in the participation rate.
Yeah, right. And so I think that there are many other influences on our economy other than just the interest rate. And matter of fact, some countries even have a negative interest rate. And the point of the negative interest rate is to discourage people from putting money in the bank. That is, they think that, well, gee, if I can discourage people from putting money in the bank, they'll go out and spend it. Well, spend it on projects that they otherwise would not have spent it on, and that just is shown around the world that it just doesn't work.
Malinvestment. Right?
That's right.
Yeah. Dr. Williams, switching gears with you since we've only got a limited amount of time, and again, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here on the John Fredericks Show with Tom deSabla and Colonel Mike. Dr. Williams, let's switch gears a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about, you've spoken recently about the Black Lives Movement, about the propensity for certain demagogues to blame situations on slavery, and you've written about the percentages of families with fathers and not. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, just very briefly, many people, including Black Lives Matter, but not only them, but pseudo-intellectuals on our college campuses and others, have blamed the problems that Black Americans face today on a legacy of slavery and discrimination. They say, well, gee, the breakdown of the black family is a result of discrimination and the legacy of slavery. Well, if you just look at the figures, it just puts that to a lie. That is, today, 70% of black kids are born out of wedlock.
Hasn't it always been that way?
No, it has not. That is, in 1965, when Moynihan was writing about it, and he was taken to the farm, he was called a racist, it was 25% the illegitimacy rate. And in 1938, the illegitimacy rate among blacks was 11%, and that among whites was 3%. And if you look at today, slightly over 30% of black kids live in two-parent families. And people will say, well, they'll blame that on slavery and discrimination. But in my book, Race and Economics, I show that in 1880, close to 70 to 80% of black kids lived in two-parent families. And in New York City, up until 1925, it was 85% of black kids lived in two-parent families. And in New York City, I doubt whether you find 15% living in two-parent families today. And so one of the very, very important things about looking at this is that if we say that the problems that blacks face are caused by society at large, caused by discrimination, well, you won't focus on the true causes of the problem. And one of the causes of the problem is indeed family breakdown. And you find that kids born into single-family parents, they're more likely to wind up in jail, less likely to graduate from high school, more likely to commit suicide and engage in crime. And so two-parent families are very, very important. I don't care whether you're black or white.
What do you see as the reason that, since it's not, if you don't think it's a legacy of slavery and discrimination, what do you see? I already know the answer, by the way. I'm sure you know that I do, but I want to hear you say it. What do you see as the root cause behind this breakdown?
Well, if you ask any economist, whether he's liberal or conservative, he'll tell you that if you tax something, you're going to get less of it. And if you subsidize something, you're going to get more of it. And what we've been doing through the welfare state, we've been subsidizing slovenly behavior. That is, we've been making it fairly attractive for people to say, well, look, I'm not going to go to work, I'm not going to go to high school, I'm going to have a baby out of wedlock, because it's not that much of a cost to it. That is, a girl has a baby out of wedlock when she's 16 or 17 years old. She gets welfare payments, she gets housing, she gets food stamps and other kinds of stuff. So it makes that kind of lifestyle fairly comfortable.
Creates an incentive.
And also the social values have changed, too. That is, it used to be an utter disgrace to have an illegitimate baby. Today, the social values have changed whereby it's no longer a disgrace. People even have baby showers for illegitimate children.
That's interesting. You know, it's funny because I have a girl friend of mine that she had her child when she's about 18, and I don't know who was recommended it, but somebody suggested that she get on Section 8 because she needed help. You know, it's a helping hand. It's not. But you know what, though, Dr. Williams? It's 30 years later, and she's still on Section 8. Men have wanted to marry her, and she said no. She said no several times to guys with good jobs wanted to marry her. She never said yes to any of that. She's still on Section 8 to this day.
Poor people are poor, but they're not stupid. That is, if she were to do something, to behave responsibly, get married, or even get a job, there's a huge tax on that. She loses all these handout programs, and as I said, poor people are poor, but they're not fools.
I heard that.
They're not stupid.
Yeah, I heard that. And, I think that it's also kind of devalues. It's interesting about Section 8 because it devalues it saps your motivation. Because if you think about Section 8, most big cities, Section 8, there's a big waiting list, right? But yet when you talk to people about welfare in Section 8, they say, well, it's supposed to just be a helping hand. It's not supposed to last forever. But Dr. Williams, if you're waiting 5 years to get on it, how are you supposed to expect somebody to get off it in 3 or 4 years? You waited 8 years to get on it.
That's absolutely right. And just one other problem that people don't know and people don't pay much attention to, and that is the academic achievement of blacks. That is, the average black kid who graduates from high school. That's if he graduates in the first place. He has the reading, writing, and computational skills of a white 7th or 8th grader, and these statistics are easily available through the National Assessment of Education Progresses in the Department of Education. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's called Nation's Report Card. That is devastating. How in the world are you going to make in our society when you can't read or write? That is in Detroit. I think the number is only 3%, 3 or 4% of the students in the city of Detroit are proficient in English, reading, and computation. Now, and you can't blame this on discrimination because Detroit, they've had Democrat mayors for more than a half century. Blacks have been mayors, chief of police, superintendent of schools, and teachers. You can't blame it on discrimination. You have to find the blame somewhere else.
I think you've said that black people need to have a conversation among themselves and figure out exactly what's going on here. I mean, I can't really say that, Dr. Williams, but thank God you can. Colonel Mike has something he wants to ask you.
Hi, Dr. Williams. Hello, Dr. Williams. This is Colonel Mike. I'm co-hosting with Tom deSabla today.
Hi,
Thank
Colonel.
you for coming on the show.
I've
read some of your stuff in the past, and I think you're really great at what you do. And, my question is, we can go to Iraq, we can go to Syria, we can go to Afghanistan, we could talk about nation building and roads and schools. And then we can't get to Camden, New Jersey, which you're familiar with, and it's just been a total failure like other cities in America. And however, as bad as the education is, and you've taught at universities, somehow or another our kids cannot get educated, but we're allowing tremendous amounts, huge amounts of H-1B visas to come in, and right in Northern Virginia take the jobs in Reston, Herndon, Sterling, McLean, with agencies like Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, and then tell our kids, hey, you need more of a formal education and we'll give you some loans. What do you think about the education system and where we're just saying, okay, dumb it down and then bring in these H-1Bs?
Well, I was talking to a fellow who owned a hotel in San Diego some years ago, and he said, if we crack down on immigration, I would have to shut down this hotel because I could not get any workers. I'm competing with the welfare system. I'm competing with food stamps to get American workers to come and work for him. And so I think that it's probably a mistake to blame, for anybody to blame our problems on immigration. The problems are far more. We've had immigration going on in our country since our inception, but we have not had the kind of economic problems and the kind of social problems that we have today.
Not to mention, if I may break in and say, I think a lot of these countries, particularly India, their education systems are turning out better educated kids than we are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
it's our own bed.
Dr. Williams, wouldn't you say that the education system in India and Singapore today is equivalent to what it was in America in the 50s?
Well, I don't have any idea. I can't put my finger on it, but the point is that in many countries they spend far less money and get far better results than what we've gotten in our own country.
I heard that. Dr. Williams, you taught me something back in 2007. I never forgot it, and that is that the measure of your expertise is in your mastery of a subject is, can you explain it to a layman? And I think you do a brilliant job at that, and we appreciate you so much for coming on the show. And you're a treasure.
Well, thanks. Let's do it again.
You got it, Dr. Williams. We'll do it again. Thank you so much for taking the time.